Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Anne, but I also go by my nickname Nini. I like to focus on Midwest true crime because I'm a Minnesota farmer's daughter. Today we're going to go to North Dakota and talk about a love triangle that went up in flames. Literally. Nikki Ensel and her lover Earl Howard murdered Nikki's husband Chad, then tried to burn the house down to hide all the evidence. Their plan was to take the insurance money and run away to Texas and live happily ever after. Except they are idiots. They are probably the two dumbest criminals in North Dakota, if not the entire Midwest. Now, just a heads up, Nikki Ensel is a very annoying person to listen to. Most of the time, you can't even tell what she's saying. She talks in this whiny baby voice, mumbles, and at times goes into this high-pitched squealing, so you might not want to listen to this one with headphones. Here's a sneak peek of what I'm talking about.
Nikki, calm down for me, okay? Nikki.
See what I mean? Chad Entzel was born on March 31st, 1977, and grew up in Halliday, a very tiny town on the west side of North Dakota. After college, he moved to Bismarck. Chad loved to be around people. He had many hobbies that he enjoyed, including coaching Little League, stock car racing, shooting darts, and bowling. Chad was a very skilled bowler and rarely bowled a bad game. He married his college sweetheart Susie in 1996. They divorced in 2014. Nothing too serious caused the divorce. Chad spent a lot of time away from home on his hobbies, and these hobbies also cost a lot of money, so they would argue about that. Chad still wanted to find love, so he turned to online dating, and in 2015, he met Nikki Hines. Nikki was living in South Dakota at the time. Nikki had 2 sons from previous relationships. She also had a criminal record. She had been arrested in South Dakota and Minnesota for writing bad checks, insurance fraud, and financial fraud. Nikki loved to take selfies, but only from a flattering angle. You know, gotta stretch that arm up as high as possible. Since Chad and Nikki lived in different states, they had a long-distance relationship and mostly just saw each other on weekends. But that didn't stop their relationship from moving quickly. Most of Chad's family didn't even meet Nikki until after they were engaged. The two got married in Vegas on May 21st, 2016, and Nikki and her boys moved to Bismarck. Chad loved being a stepdad, and he grew very close with one of Nikki's sons because they had a lot of similar interests. In November 2019, they moved into a rental home northeast of Bismarck. Chad worked for Interstate Power Systems, and in December 2019, Nikki started working for Community Options. She also had a side gig of a baking business called Nikki's Savory Sweets. I don't know how her baking skills were, but her spelling skills have room for improvement. The Facebook page for her business is still up. North Dakota winters are cold and snowy, and this was no different in 2019. For the Christmas and New Year's holidays, Nikki sent her boys to stay with her parents in South Dakota. Chad was 42 and Nikki was 39. On December 27th, Nikki texted Chad that she was busy with work training and they only did it at night. The next morning, Chad texted Nikki and asked if she came home last night. She said, "For a bit, I'm at training. It started at 7. Chad said, "Oh, okay. Have a good day." On December 29th, Nikki texted Chad and told him it was the last day of training. Chad responded, "Sounds like a very long, intense training. Haven't seen you in a few days. Glad it's the last day of training. You always succeed at what you do, babe." Nikki came home briefly the morning of December 30th, but left about 15 minutes later. A few minutes later, Chad then left for work. Chad came home shortly after 5, then left to do one of his favorite hobbies, bowling. He headed to Midway Lanes, bowled for a few hours, then headed home around 10:20 p.m. The Ensels had a security camera that faced their driveway, but it got turned off and didn't record Chad arriving home that night. But the door sensors were still working, and it noted the garage door opened and closed around 10:35 p.m., which makes sense that it was Chad arriving home because the bowling alley was about a 10-minute drive from the home. The next morning, Nikki called Chad's work and said he wasn't feeling good and he wouldn't be into work that day. The day after that, January 1st, 2020, was a holiday and most people had the day off. On the morning of Thursday, January 2nd, Chad didn't show up for work and nobody called him in sick that day. Now his coworkers were worried. They tried calling Chad and got no answer. God bless Chad's coworkers because man did they care about him. They kept trying to get a hold of Chad and they couldn't. They tried calling Nikki several times and say, "Hey, we think something serious is going on here." They called her at least 15 times that day. She did answer one of the calls at 9:44 a.m., and the coworkers told her they couldn't get a hold of Chad, but she said she couldn't get away from work to check on him. Around noon, they drove out to the house and saw Chad's truck parked in the driveway. They knocked and got no answer, so they called the police and asked them to do a welfare check.
Central Dakota Communications, how can I help you?
I'm calling to see if you guys could do a welfare check on one of our employees.
Sure.
His wife called in sick for work on Tuesday, and we haven't heard from him since.
Okay. What's the address for him?
I believe it's 4900 43rd Avenue Northeast.
And the name?
Chad Entzel.
All right, I'll get him out there to check on that and then give you a call back.
I appreciate it.
Police went to the house and knocked and got no answer and looked around a bit. They didn't see anything alarming that would justify breaking down the door, so they had to leave. At 5 p.m., Nikki's shift ended, so she left work and drove home. When she tried to go in the house, she encountered a bunch of smoke. She called 911 around 5:25 p.m. Brace yourselves for this 911 call.
I came out here to check. My husband sent a text message that he didn't come in today, and I've been good 3 days, and so I'm coming here to check. And I walked in, I opened the door, and I walked in, and the house is smoky. I can't get in the door. It's smoky in the house.
Okay, so you see smoke?
It's smoky in there, and I can't get in the door.
Okay, do you see any flames at all?
I don't.
Okay, and you were coming here to check on who again? I'm sorry?
Check on my husband. I've been out for a few days.
Okay.
And his work called and said he didn't come in at all. And I tried calling him, no answers. They tried calling him, no answer. I was just swamped. I couldn't get away at work today, and I'm coming out now because I'm off work, and he can't get in the door. And when I look, everything's black.
Okay.
Guys, so I want to go in and check.
Slow. Okay, Nikki, calm down for me, okay? Nikki, I need you to calm down for me, okay? Nikki. Okay, I need you to wait outside, Nikki. Did you arrive in a vehicle?
I'm in my car.
Are you parked in a safe spot?
No, I'm right in. I almost think I'm in the driveway. I'm driving now. I'm in the driving.
Okay, Nikki, stay on the line. I'm going to be dispatching out help. I'm going to put you on hold, but don't hang up, okay?
Yeah, I'm driving now. I'm driving.
What's that, Nikki?
I was going to inside.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. What's going on?
I just want to go inside.
For everyone's safety, until you meet with deputies, I want you to wait in your vehicle for your own safety, okay? Can you go to your vehicle?
Yeah, I'm going to make fire. Go now.
They're on their way. They're coming as safely as they can, okay?
Please don't hurry.
Yep, they're on their way, Nikki, okay?
Oh, hurry. You're not coming. I see the bear truck.
They're going to be there as fast as they can. They're almost there.
He's here. The bear truck is here.
That poor 911 operator, he deserves a medal. Firefighters and police arrived at the home, but there wasn't a massive fire they had to tackle. You really couldn't tell anything was wrong from the outside of the house except from the backside. There was a lot of smoke damage and soot all over the inside of the house. They found an active fire in the basement on the furnace, so the firefighters put that out. As they searched the house, they could tell a fire had occurred in the master bedroom because things were heavily burned in there. But it had gone out on its own prior to firefighters showing up. On the floor near the bed, they found the body of Chad Entzel. He had been badly burned. A shotgun was on the bed, and there were 2 whiskey bottles found in the room. A propane space heater was near the mattress. Police were thinking Chad got drunk, possibly shot himself, then the space heater accidentally started the mattress on fire. Chad's body was badly burnt, or as Nikki put it, crispy. so they couldn't tell exactly what his wounds were just by looking at him. That night, Nikki sat in a police car with a sergeant. She told him she hadn't been home the past few days because she had been staying at the Staybridge Hotel because their furnace hadn't been working. She had multiple medical conditions that were aggravated by the cold, MS, cancer, and a degenerative nerve disease. She said Chad didn't stay with her at the hotel because they got into an argument over the furnace. She also said that Chad was an alcoholic and would drink 2 cases of whiskey a month. From my understanding, there's 12 bottles of whiskey in a case, so that's 24 bottles of whiskey a month. And Nikki said he also drank beer on top of that. She said when Chad would get drunk, he would get violent and hit her, and he called this his drinking game. Nikki pulled out her phone and showed the sergeant some pictures of bruises that Chad had given her, almost like, see, he hit me.
She explained to me that her and her husband had a very abusive relationship, meaning he was abusive to her. She proceeded to then show me photos of what she articulated as some of the photos from the abuse.
How long did it take her to pull up that photo?
Oh, it was pretty quick. It was almost like she was prepared to tell me.
She said the last time she saw Chad was Monday, December 30th. She said they texted that night and Chad told her he was mad because he lost his bowling game and he was going to take out his frustration on Nikki and play his drinking game. The sergeant asked to see those text messages, and Nikki didn't have them, so then she was like, oh, it must have been a phone call.
Sure, Jan.
The crime scene, including Nikki's car, was locked down, so Nikki asked the sergeant if he could get a phone box out of her car for her. He got it and noticed it was addressed to an Earl Howard at the AT&T store in Bismarck. He was like, who's Earl Howard? The sergeant described Nikki's behavior that night as erratic.
What was her demeanor during your interview?
I would describe it as erratic. 1 minute, bright, cheery, happy, not fitting the situation, and then it would be hysterical, forced, or pressured breathing and kind of high-pitched crying and kind of squealing.
Nikki's behavior wasn't the only thing that was bizarre. The crime scene evidence was not adding up. The gun was on the bed and out of reach of where Chad was found, so that didn't fit with a suicide. Plus, the fire on the furnace was a completely separate fire from the one that had been in the bedroom. What are the odds that 2 accidental fires would start in your house in 2 separate locations on the same night? They found part of a cigarette box on the floor near the furnace and debris on top of the furnace, which indicated someone piled stuff on top of there to start the fire. Police brought in a very important investigator, a doggy named Webster, who was trained to sniff out flammable liquids. He alerted almost immediately that there was flammable liquid in the master bedroom. They initially were not going to do an autopsy on Chad, but now that the evidence was starting to look like this might have been an arson, they decided to do one. They discovered Chad had been shot twice. One shot went through his left tricep, through his shoulder, into the side of his neck. The second shot was directly into the left side of Chad's head. It appeared he had been sleeping in bed when the first shot occurred because pellet holes were found in the wall behind the head of the bed. After that first shot, he must have been able to get up and walk around and try to get away because a blood trail was found going around the bed. He was then shot the second time, which was a fatal shot, and he dropped to the floor. He had been dead prior to the fire starting because no soot was found in his lungs. There was also a pretty clear outline of his body in the soot on the floor, indicating he had not moved as the fire burned around him. The space heater left some interesting markings. If the fire had burned while it was stationary, there would have been just one circle on the floor, but there were multiple circles. So this meant the space heater had been moved more than once during the fire. They could tell from the stages of Chad's body that he had been dead a while prior to being found on January 2nd. The autopsy couldn't determine Chad's blood alcohol level at the time he died, but there were no signs of chronic alcohol use. So Nikki's story about Chad being an alcoholic was questionable. It was pretty obvious the fire had been intentionally set. Chad had been murdered, and the scene had been staged to look like he ended his own life, and the fires had been started to try to burn the evidence. And police were looking right at Nikki. Nikki had said she was staying at the Staybridge Hotel since the house furnace wasn't working, but there were no rooms rented under Nikki's name. However, there was one rented under 40-year-old Earl Howard's name. This guy's name kept popping up, so police were like, Nikki, who is this dude? She said he was a friend of hers and Chad's, and he lived in Canada but was in Bismarck looking for work. She said she was staying in a room with him at the hotel, but they weren't sleeping in the same bed, and Chad was cool with it, because all husbands would be cool with their wife staying in a hotel with another man. When they searched the room at the hotel, they found a lot of Nikki's clothes and personal items. Way more than you would expect to find if someone was just staying in a hotel for a few days. The fridge was also full of steak and butter. They found a pair of shoes that Nikki had not been wearing the night Chad's body was discovered. They noted what looked like soot on the bottom of the toes of one of the shoes. Nikki was looking suspicious, but did she have motive to kill Chad?
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
She was the sole beneficiary to Chad's life insurance policies. One was for $500,000 and one was for $100,000. Nikki had also recently called their renter's insurance policy and increased the coverage on jewelry and personal property.
So would you say that $20,000 is enough to replace your personal belongings?
I'm going to say I have like $5,000 in just jewelry.
When you said $5,000, is it because you had the jewelry appraised, or was it purchased recently?
I had my wedding ring appraised, and I had the earrings appraised, and then I've bought other stuff recently, and I have copies of everything because I always go just to one jewelry store. I only buy from one jewelry store, period.
Okay.
I know it was. Me and my daughter got matching earrings.
Oh, okay. So the $20,000 in coverage for personal property also includes $4,000 for loss of use, which covers additional living expenses in case you're displaced from your home due to a covered claim, or in case you and your family are displaced from your home due to a covered claim, such as a fire. So once again, your policy will become effective at 12:01 a.m. tonight, which will be December the 27th. And you're all set. Anything else that I can help you?
No, that's it.
All right. It's been a pleasure assisting you. Thank you so much for calling. Have a great evening.
You too. Have a good holiday.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Happy holidays.
This policy went into effect at midnight on December 27th, 2019, just a few days before Chad's body was discovered. On January 3rd, just the day after Chad's body was discovered, Nikki called that renter's insurance policy to ask about filing a claim.
When did it happen and what happened?
I found my honey in the house fire.
You were in a house fire?
My husband.
I'm sorry?
Our home caught on fire.
And
my husband was in there.
You lost your husband, dear?
Yeah, in the house last night. They found him, the firemen did.
All right, dear. Well, you and I are going to take all the time that we both need, okay?
Okay.
So how did that occur?
His work called yesterday and he was coming to work. And I said I didn't know. I hadn't heard from him. I had a busy day and couldn't get away. And then I would try to contact them. And so I did. And he didn't answer back. And so when he got off last night, I went home. And I opened the garage door. And they got in my car. And they made me through the garage. And they couldn't get through the door because it was hot.
That same day, she called Chad's employer to ask if they paid any benefits to his widow. A couple days after that, she called Chad's life insurance to ask about the $600,000 she would get. So, not really acting like a grieving widow. You could not do anything nowadays without leaving some kind of digital trail. Nikki Ensel and Earl Howard were too stupid to realize this, so police were very easily able to put together a timeline of what happened in the days leading up to Chad's death. They looked into their phone calls, text messages, Google search histories, surveillance cameras from the home and hotel and stores. They looked at bank transactions. Like I said, we leave a digital trail everywhere. Nikki and Earl met in March of 2019 and began an affair. Earl had grown up in Texas but married a Canadian woman and moved to Canada. They had a daughter together who was 9 at the time of the fire. So during their relationship, Nikki lived in North Dakota and Earl lived in Ontario. In August of 2019, they set up a joint bank account together. There were hotel and flight transactions that proved Earl had flown to Bismarck in October and stayed for a few days, and he came back in mid-December and stayed for a few days again. You heard in that phone call with the renter's insurance, Nikki mentioned having matching earrings for her and her daughter.
I know it was. Me and my daughter got matching earrings.
Nikki doesn't have a daughter. She was talking about Earl's daughter. Those earrings she mentioned were purchased in October 2019 during Earl's visit to Bismarck. Nikki paid for those earrings using she and Chad's bank account. It's very apparent Nikki and Earl were planning to move to Texas together because they had looked at real estate there online. Nikki even had a job interview lined up in Austin, Texas for the end of January 2020. Nikki made that call to the renter's insurance on December 26 to increase the payout. She set up the payments for that policy to be paid with she and Earl's joint bank account. Nikki's story was that Earl was helping her leave her abusive husband. Why do you care about renter's insurance for a place you're not going to live anymore? Around 5:30 p.m. on December 27th, Nikki took a one-way flight from Bismarck to Minneapolis. This was proven by flight reservations and parking stubs from the Bismarck airport. In Minneapolis, she met up with her lover who had driven to the Twin Cities from Ontario. When she had texted Chad about being in training for work, she was actually in Minneapolis with her lover doing some shopping, including to an adult store. They then drove back to Bismarck in Earl's truck. Earl checked into the Staybridge Hotel in Bismarck a little before 2 a.m. on Sunday, December 29th, 2019. He checked in by himself, and I don't know if they were thinking they were being smart by doing that, but just minutes later, Nikki is seen entering the hotel with Earl through a different door. At 1 p.m. later that day, they leave the hotel and go to Walmart to do some shopping. Look at that smug look on her face as she waddles out of Walmart. Around 5 p.m. that evening, Nikki forwarded Earl the confirmation email she received about the renter's insurance policy being ready to go. At 11:25 p.m., they left the hotel and went back to Walmart to do some more shopping. On Monday morning, December 30th, Nikki went home for a few minutes and then went to work. Earl picked Nikki up for lunch that day and they went to Ruby Tuesdays. He then dropped Nikki back off at work. He dropped her off at the front door. How dumb do you get that you have your lover drop you off at the front door of your workplace? That afternoon, Earl went to Praxair and bought a $350 torch kit. This is something commonly used in welding and feeds oxygen and gas to a welding machine to get a flame. These dumbasses left that torch kit at the crime scene. It was found in the garage of the house. The tanks were empty. Praxair employees testified that they always fill the tanks with oxygen and gas after the customers purchase them. So this was obviously the flammable liquid that Webster the fire dog smelled in the bedroom. That evening, Nikki texted Chad to wish him good luck at bowling, but this was just to confirm that he actually was bowling and not at home. Nikki tried fiddling with the home security system setting several times, but she wasn't successful. She and Earl were caught on the home security camera arriving at the house around 7 p.m. For the next hour, she and Earl made several trips loading items into Earl's pickup and then left. Nikki is then successfully able to turn off the security camera at the house, but she was unable to turn off the door sensors. Nikki and Earl then head back to the hotel and are caught on surveillance bringing those items into the hotel room. Chad left the bowling alley at 10:20 to head home, and this was the last time he was seen alive. Since Nikki had turned off the security cameras, Chad wasn't seen arriving home, but Dummy hadn't been able to turn off the garage door sensors, so it was still noted that the garage door was open and closed around 10:35, which was most likely Chad arriving home and going to bed. A little after 1 a.m. on now December 31st, 2019, Nikki and Earl left the hotel. When initially asked about this, Nikki said she and Earl were going to look at Christmas lights at 1 a.m. The garage door at the Entzel home noted it opened at 1:11 a.m., so it makes sense that this was Earl and Nikki because the home was about 9 miles from the hotel. At 2:56 a.m., the garage door was closed. Nikki would later admit that they did go to the house that morning, but she said it was because she needed some of her medication patches, and she said she had trouble finding them. When they pointed out to her that she had been in the house for 1 hour and 40 minutes, she said, "Oh, I decided to load the dishwasher too." Her BS about looking for the medication patches was easily disproven because they were found in the kitchen on top of a plastic shelving unit in clear view. Nikki was seen on hotel security footage arriving back at the hotel at 3:12 a.m. Earl is then seen entering the hotel about an hour later at 4:10 a.m. As he enters, he looks directly at the security camera. This is right after one of them had killed Chad. Why they entered the hotel an hour apart has never been known. Nikki at one point claimed it was because Earl was smoking a cigarette and she hated the smell of smoke, but it doesn't take an hour to smoke a cigarette. When Nikki and Earl woke up a few hours later, there was no news of the house being on fire. A little before 6:30 a.m., Earl left the hotel. At 6:32 a.m., the garage door was opened, and 6 minutes later, it was closed again. Police think Earl was repositioning the space heater to get closer to the mattress since a proper fire had not started. Nikki then called Chad into work sick to buy them more time for the house to catch on fire. By that night, there was still no news of the house being on fire, so the idiots went back there and the garage door was opened around 11 p.m. and closed 15 minutes later. This is when police think they fiddled with the furnace to try to get a fire going there since the space heater in the bedroom hadn't caused the house to go up in flames. If Nikki and Earl had just researched the basics of fire chemistry, they probably would have been more successful, because when firefighters arrived at the house, the bedroom door was shut. Fires need oxygen to burn, so by closing the door, they were not allowing more oxygen to come in. So they basically put out their own fire. Wednesday, January 1st was the holiday. Neither Chad or Nikki was scheduled to work, so Nikki didn't have to call Chad in sick that day. She spent the day shopping with Earl. Again. These two do a lot of shopping. They made 2 trips to Riddle's Jewelry in the mall that day. One time was to get earrings repaired, and another was to get receipts of the jewelry that Nikki owned so that she'd be able to show them to the insurance company. But remember, this was before Chad's body or a fire was discovered. On Thursday, January 2nd, everyone returned to work after the holiday, except for poor Chad. Nikki started receiving concerned phone calls from Chad's coworkers around 8:59 a.m. And like I said, they were very concerned about Chad, so they called her multiple times. She only answered the one call at 9:44 a.m. to say she was too busy with work to check on Chad. About an hour later, Nikki did a Google search for a local funeral home. This is still before Chad's body was found. Also, sometime that day, Nikki forwarded an email to Earl about some homes that were for sale in Texas. So the same time that Chad's coworkers are desperately concerned about him and trying to get a hold of him and calling police to do welfare checks, Nikki is looking at funeral homes for her husband and real estate where she can live with her lover. Around 2:30 that afternoon, Nikki texted Chad and said, "Worked called and said you not been there all day? What are you doing, your drinking game, and forget you have to work?" At 5 p.m., Nikki left work and finally goes to the house where she discovered the smoke and makes that annoying 911 call. Police brought Nikki in for a formal interrogation on January 7th. It is just as annoying to listen to as that 911 call. She talks in that baby voice, mumbles, makes wounded bird noises. Nikki first talked again about how Chad was an abusive alcoholic.
That's so bad when you said this because I had cancer. What have you got on?
What do you grab? And it started 2 years ago. That's how it started. We started by grabbing him. How much was he drinking?
A piece of ground, a piece of pepper float. I'm like, squeeze me so hard.
Photos were taken of Nikki during this interrogation, but she only had one small dime-sized bruise on her wrist and some red marks on her chest that look like when you scratch yourself. Nikki said Chad once followed her to the gym, and when she was on the treadmill, she saw him out in the parking lot staring at her, apparently trying to make sure she wasn't cheating on him. The sergeant asked Nikki who Earl was.
Who was your friend?
Earl.
Is he a neighbor or something, or what?
No, we just met through the area. I just ordered food like anybody else and started being a repeat customer and hanging out and being friends with us and everything else. And
so Chad knew him too?
Yeah, just became friends. And
what did he think about us then?
He was so sweet on me. You're better than that?
You can tell me if were you guys romantically involved or anything? No? Okay,
No.
So you weren't boyfriend or girlfriend or anything?
No. I'm married.
I know, but I just with all that going on.
No. I'm married. He's married.
Did you tell Earl about the abuse or anything like that?
He saw the bruise marks, a couple times, but he just said, I wish, wish you guys the best. I wish,
Did he ever seem angry by it?
No.
The sergeant then tells Nikki that they know that Chad didn't die in a fire. She played dumb, which was not a hard act for her to pull off.
I'm going to say that Chad's death was not an accident.
What?
Based off of all of the information that I've gathered, Chad's death was not an accident.
I don't understand.
We know how this happened. And Nikki, I think you know how too.
I don't. That's why I asked you. I don't know what happened.
Chad did not die in the fire.
Okay.
Chad was killed by a gunshot.
What?
Chad was murdered. Is there...
Why would anybody...
Nikki, where did you go after you guys came back from bowling? Or after you came there when Chad was at bowling?
We went back to the hotel.
Who's we?
Well, he helped me carry the stuff in.
Huh?
He helped me carry the stuff in.
Who did?
Earl.
I need to know why that Chad
I
was
don't
murdered.
know. I have no idea. I just want him back. I just want him back.
I know. I know. Nikki, did you have anything to do with Chad's death?
No. That's a terrible thing to do.
Do you know if Earl would have anything to do?
No, he wouldn't.
They then bring in an agent with the North Dakota Criminal Bureau of Investigation to kind of crack the whip and put an end to Nikki's BS.
Nikki, this is Joe Aarons.
Hi.
He's with Bureau of Criminal Investigations.
Hello.
And
I have to go soon.
I know you've been talking to him and told him some things. Some of that I can tell you right now is not true. I believe that you know what happened, and I think it's in your best interest to just be honest with us about what you know. What did Chad think of you going and staying in a hotel room with Earl?
Didn't think anything of it.
Chad didn't think anything of that? Really?
No.
I'm a married man myself. He's married. That would not fly with you and Earl. It's more than just a friendship. I mean, there's definitely a romantic relationship there, right? If I told you that we had some information from some of the apps on your phone that says differently, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I think he's, super nice person. He thinks that, I'm super beautiful. I like hanging out with him. I miss him when he's not around.
Before you guys went out there that time to get your meds, why did you feel the need to go and try to tamper with the camera system?
I don't...
You logged on at 12:43 a.m. and were attempting to put the camera in like a privacy mode, which just didn't work.
Anybody can log into my cameras that have my stuff. I have my hand on the button and I'm not paying attention.
The CBI agent then confronts Nikki with the evidence that shows when they left the hotel at 1 a.m. that they went to the house.
Tell me about then what you did when you showed up around 10 after 1 in the morning, you and Earl.
Where?
At your house. Did I forget to tell you that when you tried logging off of the camera system, it didn't actually log you off and put you in that privacy mode?
Well, the house I wanted to get my meds.
But you said that you keep your meds in your purse.
do you normally have your meds with you and stuff like that?
Yeah, I always carry meds in my purse.
You didn't need meds or anything?
I always in my purse. I know, but I need my meds.
Okay.
I have a patch.
The only problem with that, Nikki, is you guys were there for an hour and 40 minutes.
No, I couldn't find my patches.
You didn't look for your patches for an hour and 40 minutes.
Nikki claimed when they got to the house, Chad was awake and sitting on the couch, and he and Earl talked while she looked for the medication. The CBI agent then confronted Nikki about them going back to the house at 6:30 a.m.
Explain to me why at 6:32 there was someone back out there. You guys were back out there. Are we about done lying?
I need my patches.
She was also confronted with info that showed they went back to the house later that night, but she claims Earl went back to get a backpack and some wrapping paper. Nikki then changed her story and said they went to the house to get some stuff and to tell Chad that she was leaving him.
I was planning on leaving.
Yes. And where were you going?
I was planning on moving away.
To where?
Texas.
She said they got in an argument and Chad said he was going to just fucking end it all and just fucking die. The sergeant pressed her that they knew something else had happened.
What happened, Nikki?
There was somebody else in the house.
Did you ever see anybody in the house when you were there? When you came back?
I didn't see anybody.
What did he look like?
I would say mid-40s. Spiked hair. Spiky hair. No glasses. Very nice teeth. Super nice teeth. He smelled like crown.
Nikki said she didn't know who this guy was, but that she had seen him at some of Chad's races before. They asked what this man looked like, so Nikki demonstrated approximately what his height was. She even drew a sketch of what he looked like, and I'm not kidding, this is the sketch. She said she heard this man call Chad Hun. Then she said there were rumors going around that Chad was cheating on her and a gambling addict. You can just see this detective's frustration over Nikki's continued lies.
What have you heard?
He's seen somebody else.
Do you have any idea like what he would be involved in as far as that?
I know Chad's deep with gambling.
Chad, deep in debt with gambling? What?
Gambling.
That was another thing. Why didn't you tell me that?
I don't know where no gambles at.
So not only was she saying Chad was a violent alcoholic who beat her, he was also a gay gambling addict in financial trouble.
Okay. Are you sure?
Then, for Pete's sake, Nikki changed her story again. She said she went to the house with Earl, but then she went back out to the truck and waited while Earl stayed inside. She said Earl and Chad argued about a gun. The investigators were so over her at this point.
People who lie to me, I feel that's being disrespectful to me. If you want me to treat you with that respect, you're going to start treating me with that respect. And your continuous lying isn't working.
She said she heard the gun go off. Earl came outside. She asked him what happened, and he told her that Chad wasn't alive. She said Earl told her he didn't know the gun was loaded and it had went off accidentally. Twice, apparently. She said it was Earl's idea to start a fire to try to cover everything up.
Who came back to set the fire?
She wrote a confession to this, but then seemed to regret that and tried to tear it up.
Enough. You don't have to be like that about it.
Nikki was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, conspiracy to commit arson, and conspiracy to tamper with physical evidence. They wanted to arrest Earl too, but they couldn't find him, so they issued a warrant for his arrest. They were able to track his card and saw he was making transactions across the Midwest on his way back to Canada. On January 9th, they arrested him in Port Huron, Michigan, about to cross the border. He was arrested and charged with the same charges as Nikki.
This is strictly your opportunity to help yourself. Tell us what happened. I need a lawyer.
Neither of them was charged with actual murder because they couldn't prove which one of them had actually killed Chad. Nikki requested to talk to investigators again, but it was just more lies where she was trying to still claim Chad abused her.
I tried to leave a couple times. Last time I tried to leave, I got murdered.
She was still claiming she sat in the truck while Earl was in the house for over an hour, killing Chad. The sergeant told her this was another lie because Nikki had been wearing her Apple Watch that night and it showed she was walking around during the time she claimed to have been sitting in the truck. The investigators were so over her at this point.
No, Nikki. Because you knew this was getting out of control.
You didn't.
Bullshit.
I didn't know you were taking my phone.
Bullshit.
Things were no longer blissful for the scheming lovers, and they wanted nothing to do with each other anymore. Nikki claimed Earl shot Chad. Earl claimed Nikki shot Chad. COVID delayed their trial, and it was scheduled to start in October 2021. Just a week prior to the trial, Earl pleaded guilty to all his charges. Earl said he did meet Nikki through her baking business, and that it started with cookies, and then turned to some nookie. My words, not his.
It started off with cookies. I ordered some cookies from her because why not?
Is it fair to say that eventually your guys' relationship became romantic?
Yes.
Nikki told him Chad abused her and he was going to help her leave him, but he said he had no intention of moving to Texas with her.
What were your intentions regarding her after she left Chad?
I was going to break it off.
So you weren't going to leave your wife and move with her to Texas?
No, ma'am. You can sniff out crazy eventually. She doesn't seem like she's all there all the time.
He claimed he had no intention of hurting Chad, but when they went there that night, Chad was in the living room watching TV and things got heated after Earl told him Nikki was leaving him. But he still claimed that Nikki shot Chad.
We had words. He asked me to leave his home or face police. I left. I sat in her car and she came back out after that. On the way back to the hotel, she said she shot Chad. I said, okay, I'll deal with it.
Earl Howard was sentenced to 50 years in prison with 25 years suspended. Nikki was now going to go to trial on her own, but just weeks before her trial was going to start, her lawyer requested to be removed from the case.
I know we're late in the game and I wouldn't be filing a motion to withdraw if I didn't feel it was absolutely necessary at this point. But there's been a breakdown in the attorney-client relationship at this point, which I believe leaves me no option but to withdraw.
I don't know why there'd be a breakdown in their relationship because Nikki's such an easy person to talk to. Nikki's trial finally began in September 2022 when she was 41. The lawyer she ended up with was kind of a dud. He didn't give an opening statement, didn't cross-examine many witnesses, didn't call any of his own witnesses. I loved the prosecutor. She has a perfect name, Julie Ann Lawyer. She was organized, intelligent, concise. I got a kick out of a comment I saw in a video that said how impressive it was that the prosecutor was doing the work all on their own. Like she was the only one sitting there preparing the documents, putting stuff up on the screen. She didn't have an assistant or a paralegal with her. And somebody said there aren't enough people in North Dakota for that. The man they rented the home from testified that Nikki did contact him about the furnace not working twice, once on December 25th and once on December 27th. He checked out the furnace on December 25th and the house was warm when he got there and 72 degrees. He gave the furnace a once-over and it was working just fine. When Nikki contacted them again on December 27th, he contacted his furnace professionals to go look at it and they couldn't find anything wrong with it either. Furnace experts testified that even after the fire, they examined the furnace and there was nothing wrong with it. One of Nikki's friends testified that Nikki told her that Chad was abusing her. Text messages were shown where Nikki was talking about scratches Chad had on his neck from an affair he was having with some chick from bowling. She texted this friend proof of the abuse, which was a picture of her with a black eye. I don't see a black eye, but I think this was the only selfie Nikki ever took not from a super high angle. Several people, including Chad's first wife, testified that Chad was not a violent person. They said Chad did drink, including whiskey, but he was more of a social drinker. They said when he would drink, he would get giggly, not violent.
Was there ever any violence in your marriage?
No.
Did Chad drink?
Socially, yes.
What did he drink?
I think mostly beer and maybe a mixed drink like some sort of whiskey, maybe.
Did his demeanor or attitude change when he would drink alcohol?
Not in a negative way. I would say he got more lively.
Did he ever drink to excess?
No.
Did you ever see him intoxicated?
Maybe once a year at a Christmas party.
Did you ever see him get violent when he drank?
No.
Did you ever see him violent at all?
No.
You got divorced in August 2014?
Correct.
And you said you haven't seen him since a couple months after that, so maybe October 2014?
Probably.
So you really haven't seen him in 5 years, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Married to him for 17.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
People can change in 5 years? Maybe?
I don't believe to that extent.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Not one single person testified that Chad was an alcoholic, mean, prone to anger, or violence. The consensus was that Chad was good-natured and liked to have fun. And when you look at Chad's text to Nikki, there's no evidence that he was controlling or mean to her. She was gone for a few days prior to his murder, and he didn't yell at her or demand that she come home immediately. He encouraged her and supported her. Chad's mother testified, "She is the cutest thing ever, and it broke my heart listening to her."
How would you describe Chad?
He always had this crazy grin on his face, and he had dimples. Everybody always commented on his dimples. And he seems like he always had a joke to tell me when he saw me. He never failed to call me on my birthday and tease me how old I was getting. He just always seemed like he was in a good mood all the time.
Did you ever see him fight?
I mean, him and Nikki, you mean?
No, in general.
Fight with anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, good grief, no.
When were you made aware that Chad had died?
Lori had called told me she was coming over, something that she had to just tell me something, and I it was a text, and I texted back, "Is it bad?" She said yes, and then she came over with the chaplain and a police officer.
Did you talk with the deputies after Chad died? Take your time, there's some water up there too if you need it. I handed you State's Exhibit number 36. Do you recognize the person in that photo?
Yes.
Who is that?
It's my son.
Is that how you remember him?
Oh, yeah, it was that quirky grin on his face and his dimples.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
His sister also testified.
How did you get along with him growing up?
Actually, pretty good. He's pretty patient.
Did you ever fight with him?
Yes.
How? Verbally or physically?
Oh, verbally.
Was he ever physical with you?
Never.
How would you describe Chad?
Chad was a really pretty amazing person, actually. He's very happy. Wanted everybody to be happy. He's 4 years older than me, so he watched me when our parents worked, and we spent a lot of time together, and actually got along really well.
Like I said, Nikki's lawyer was a dud, and all he talked about in his closing statement was that Earl had not testified.
We're missing the biggest, most important piece. His name's been mentioned how many times? They've entered a picture of his truck into exhibits. Everything that was within his truck into exhibits. His phone calls, his travel log, everything. But he's invisible. Where's he at? Where is Earl Howard? I never seen him take the stand. Why not? Why is a big question. It's unanswered. Unanswered questions raise doubt. If you can resolve the question why, or if you can't resolve the question why. Thank you.
The prosecutor said that the reason they didn't have Earl testify was because they still hadn't charged anybody with murder, and they were worried that he would plead the fifth if he got on the stand. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours, and on October 4th, 2022, they found Nikki guilty of all the charges.
As to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Nikki Sue Melissa Ensel guilty. As to the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, we find the defendant Nikki Sue Melissa Ensel guilty.
Prior to her sentencing, Nikki spoke to 2020, and she changed her story yet again.
My story changes so many different times.
She is now claiming she has absolutely no idea who killed Chad, and that she was not even at the house that night. She said when they left the hotel at 1 a.m. that morning, Earl took off and went somewhere, and she went for a walk, and that was why her Apple Watch showed her as active during that time. Because it is such a good idea to go for a long walk at 1 a.m. in the middle of winter in North Dakota.
The charges I have are conspiracy charges, which means there has to be a plan. And I'm still waiting for the prosecution to show me where the plan is.
Who killed Chad, your husband?
Right. Who all knew where we lived, John?
Can you say it was Earl who killed him? Pull that trigger?
I can't say that for 100%. I wasn't there. There's no doubt about it. Not lying about it. Had my good old handy dandy Apple Watch on. Not only did I lose my husband, I and my boys lost our stuff.
She also was still denying that there was an affair with Earl.
Were you having an affair with Earl?
No, not my type.
There you are at Walmart on camera kissing him.
I didn't see no kiss given at all.
You're smooching away there.
I don't remember seeing a smooch given at all.
At Nikki's sentencing in February 2023, her lawyer said she had been easily seduced by Earl and he was the mastermind behind the whole scheme. Nikki made a statement at her sentencing, but it was basically about how much she was a victim.
I became a mom very early in life. The term kids having kids was me. I was in a life-threatening accident while pregnant. Overcame that. I have now been diagnosed with TBI. Fast forward, life's great. We're gonna have another baby. But now you have another life lesson to learn. You have cancer. Then I meet a wonderful man who I think is the most amazing man me and my boys have ever met. Yelling starts. A black crowd goes over us. My boys tell me they've been hit. I can't believe it. My happy world has now become unhappy. I get promised it will stop. I come home one day, my boys are a wreck. They've been locked in their rooms all day. Your Honor, I have been through all kinds of abuse. Now my boys have been through it. Nobody can tell me the pain I have to live through every single day. Jail is very expensive. Calls are very expensive to deal with loss. I'm asking you to please understand the losses I do also have.
The hurt and the pain at the loss of my son Chad is unbearable. It is a wound that will never heal. We will always have that reminder of our loss with the empty chair at the family get-togethers and holidays. We will forever miss hearing his crazy jokes and that infectious smile of his. There will be no more phone calls on my birthday teasing me how old I am getting. No more playing hoops or soccer or baseball with his nephews and seeing the pure joy, pure enjoyment on his face when shooting off fireworks at the 4th of July holiday with his family. You have taken all of that from us. Your actions have caused a good man his life and have forever fractured my family. And no parent should ever have to bury their child.
You took many things away from us. Birthday celebrations, holidays, Sundays just because get-togethers, and most importantly, a piece of my heart. All because you chose money over human life. We are not victims. We are a network of broken survivors. Everybody knows that the world is a much better place without you in it. People will remember my brother as a genuine great person. He will forever be loved and missed. Justice has been done. And I know I speak for a lot of people that wants you to rot in eternity where you will no longer be able to hurt anybody again.
Nikki was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. The judge mentioned that there was no proof that Chad abused her or the kids.
I have seen no evidence that Mr. Ensel abused Miss Ensel. Nothing was presented at trial. It's just her self-proclaimed statements, and those have changed today. There seems to be a never-changing story, depending on what fits her circumstances and what she thinks will help her.
You know, if it can be proven that you tried to slander the name of the person you murdered, you should have to clean the prison toilets for your entire sentence or something like that. Nikki tried to portray Chad as a gay, violent, alcoholic, gambling addict when he was none of that. He was just a good guy. It's probably a good thing that Nikki and Earl were so stupid and couldn't even figure out how to start a proper fire, because it made them that easier to catch. Cases where people get murdered for money are just disgusting because greed is just evil. That's all I have for this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.